Welcome to the Atomic Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Osborn. And on this podcast, we interview successful business owners for them to share atomic, impactful lessons that they've learned throughout the course of their business and then share them with us so we can all learn together. As always, this show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way that established businesses are creating a reliable acquisition channel of conversations with their ideal prospects. We use this method to book 26 qualified leads and sales calls in 10 days without any ad spend, outreach, endless social media posting, or any of the old, ineffective traditional marketing methods that everybody hates. To find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn to have a chat. The link to that will be in the show notes below. But on today's show, we have David Kennedy. He's the owner of David Kennedy Recruitment, where he provides global recruitment services. So, David, thanks so much for being on the show today. And I want to start off by asking you a question that I always love starting with, which is this. If you were somehow able to go back in time when you started your business, but knowing what you know now, what would you have done different in the first 12 months?
Jason, thanks for having me, first of all.
Yeah.
What would I've done differently? I mean, there could be a million things. I think at the start, I really focused mostly on the client growth area. So when you start a business, a lot of people get obsessed about how it looks, how it sounds, the business plan, etc. I come from a recruitment background, so I really focused on the client side of things at the start. Probably at the start, I would have maybe been a little bit less distracted in terms of the jobs and the clients I took on. Any business is good business when you start, but whenever you're a one-man band, so to speak, 8 years ago, I was sort of taking on contracts that I probably wouldn't take on currently. So I think on reflection, just really being quite cautious about who you say yes to, having everything documented as opposed to taking gentlemen's agreements. Because again, when you're starting, you're very trustworthy, you're quite naive. Whereas currently, if we're doing work with someone, we have SLAs, we have DocuSigns, we have agreements in place, and we don't start working until we've actually got that signed off. So that's one of the lessons I learned, and I'm still learning. Trust is everything, but also having something to back it up is very important in this world, especially when it comes to GDPR and data protection and people's privacy and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree with you because I was very much the same way when I started and just learned over time that, having those contracts in place it's just a safety net for everybody involved. It doesn't mean you trust anyone any less, but
Yeah,
it's just, yeah, it's there for when people aren't as trusting as you had perceived them to be.
it's very
So,
much a commitment, It's like I'm
yeah,
going to be reliable to you, so are you going to be reliable to me? And I think
yeah,
that gentleman's agreement sometimes it just isn't enough these days. So especially when you're mingling with people across the different countries. So yeah, that's one of the lessons learned. Pretty boring lesson to be honest with you, but something really important if you're setting something up really to have
yeah.
those sort of things in place.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things you said in there as well is that you've become much more selective in the type of people that you work with. What are the areas that your preference of working in? What's kind of your speciality around those recruitment areas?
We've sort of dabbled a lot. So my original background is BPO outsourcing, so it's contact center, multilingual contact centers. And then prior to COVID, we started working within the Forex industry, so fintech trading companies. And then a couple of years ago, we've started to do a lot of stuff in iGaming, live casino. So our business has sort of transitionally moved away from a uh, sort of volume-based agency into a more specialized area. But one thing's very important, Jason, whenever you're dealing with a client, it's communication. Recruitment is communication. It's communication is what makes businesses successful. And I find, in the initial conversations with some companies, they're not really forthcoming with information. It's quite difficult to get calls with them, etc. And when I said I'm more conscious of the fact of who I select to work with, that's a big thing for me because if you can't communicate at an early stage, it's going to become even more difficult if you've got an actual agreement in place and people are relying on you and candidates are relying on you and time is money at the end of the day and you can't get that back, unfortunately. So being really sort of clear and confident with the clients we work with as in we're going to deliver, so you need to give us some sort of communication back. And that sounds a very simple concept, but it's very difficult to get sometimes. A lot of people are busy in their own day jobs and they don't have the time to recruit. That's why they use an agency. But if they don't even have the time to respond back to you when you're trying to do recruitment for them, it just makes it very difficult. And then, reputation and brand, and people start to lose a little bit of faith in you, and the recruiters maybe become a little bit disillusioned because I'm not giving them updates and so on. So it all stems back to that communication with that actual end client.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really key thing because when people think about alignment within working with clients, oftentimes I don't think communication is the first thing that
Mm,
they think of, and yet it is. It can really make or break a client relationship for
yeah,
sure. So
it really
yeah, I
is.
love that you said that.
Such a rabbit hole, like, it's not just recruiting for a particular job, it's about knowing all the variables behind it, and logistics and everything that goes with someone choosing a job. So, a lot of the times it's very easy for companies to send out a job spec to you, but unless you've actually learnt and heard from the actual decision maker what they actually want from it, again, it's a very challenging process because everybody thinks they want something until you've actually presented something else. And then, oh, actually, I actually quite like this, so I don't want this, so I might like to add this on, and oh, this will be good to have. And again, that makes it quite challenging if the communication is one way traffic, So that's a
Yeah,
very important thing for me.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Talking around that side of things, it's kind of a similar question, but one of the things I always love to ask is around the challenges we have in business because we all have them. Sometimes we can feel like we're the only one that has dealt with a particular challenge because
Mm.
being a business owner can be isolating sometimes. But what's the number one biggest challenge that you've faced in your business so far? And it could be in any area of the business. What's the biggest challenge you faced, and what's the lesson you learned from that?
Biggest challenge is getting paid, to be honest with
Okay.
you. We're still a small business. Yes, we're operating across 40 plus countries, whatever the count is, but at the end of the day, you can't just rock up to an office with a card reader and get paid, you know? And maybe there is a job for someone in the future to travel the world with a card reader and get paid, but I don't think that's going to work. So biggest challenge is you do everything, you complete the project or the transaction, whatever, a certain amount of time's elapsed. And then at the end of the day, we all have bills to pay, no matter how we look at it. Plus, I've got recruiters to pay, etc. So that's a challenge. Thankfully, my beautiful wife Sarah has taken that challenge on. So I no longer have to be Mr. Mean Guy and Mr. Credit Control and Mr. Debt Collector. I am the person that is the front of the business, but then I have Sarah to do that for me, which is also challenging because she doesn't have that day-to-day relationship, you know.
Yeah.
So again, it's not a exciting challenge, but it is something that you have to bear in mind because if you're going to run a successful business, you need to get paid. Um, and again, it's again trying to sort of draw that line of if we're not going to get this back, we're not going to be able to work with you anymore, and you have to be sort of pretty direct about it.
Yeah.
So that is probably the number one challenge of any business in recruitment or any small business doing recruitment because we are the last people that a company want to pay. We are the last people, in fact, industry wise, that companies want to work with. But
Mhm.
we're seen as a partner. We want to be an extra arm of that
Yeah.
business's recruitment function as opposed to just being a service that they use every so often.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one of the things that you mentioned in there was actually a really good business lesson as well. It was kind of mentioned through was the whole credit control side of stuff. You brought your wife in to do that,
Mm,
and I think there's certain things as business owners that we don't enjoy doing or particularly if you're trying to trying to maintain that relationship, but then you're chasing them for money, that can become quite sour. But having someone else,
yeah,
even though it's your company, that relationship you built pretty much stays intact because if they do want to get annoyed, they can get annoyed with the person,
yeah,
chasing the money, and it kind of helps balance that out a little bit. I know for me, um, it helps me feel like, okay, I know this is what I'm doing. I stay focused on that without having to go into that. Okay, well, now we have to have a serious conversation.
Mm,
It's an awkward type thing. Sometimes
it
you have to
is.
do that when you're, depending on where you are in your business. But I think that's a really important lesson, just realizing once you get to that point, sometimes you need to let certain things go to somebody else, so you can focus on where your main strength is, which is what I took from that when you were saying
Yeah.
that was really good.
It is, and it's very helpful. We're dealing with multiple currencies and multiple time zones and multiple countries and all the rest of it. So it's important that that sort of communication stays with a fixed person as opposed to, as you said, you can't wear all these different hats. It's unrealistic. Yes, it was good at the time when I started the business, but whenever it expands and so on, I'm trying to get away from that side of it. I'm trying to focus on the relationship building, the delivery, the execution, the relationship with the recruiters, the clients, etc. Even with candidates at times. And yeah, it just becomes a little bit sour whenever you're actually, hey, do you know what? You haven't paid us for that any chance. And when you're from Northern Ireland and you put an accent on, it sounds quite aggressive at times. So it's probably not the best thing to do at times as well. But yeah, fingers crossed. It's settled a lot in the last couple of years just because of that sort of natural sort of change, I would say, as opposed
Yeah.
to trying to find someone that you can trust with all the finance and you don't know them. And it's again, it's a very important role that is very difficult to fill.
Mhm.
And Sarah came from a media marketing company before. She had her own business, so she was also running everything herself. So it was a nice partnership to expand on, I would say.
Yeah. 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 That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, as you have grown your business and you're looking forward over the next, say, 2 to 3 years, what's your goals? What would you like to achieve?
I think more consistent delivery. So my model is basically we have about 100 freelance recruiters across the world. So in many different countries, we have people who are doing stuff for us. However, Jason, as they're freelancing, they're not dedicated to a 24/7 delivery. So regardless of how busy we are, it's about trying to be that sort of 24/7 cheerleader, about trying to keep everybody on track about what we have open. If I
Mhm.
could find some sort of more let's say dedicated freelancers, which is virtually impossible to be honest with you, but that would be the main thing for me because then you have a consistent team that you can rely on. Whereas when you're dealing with freelancers, they they tend to come and go, and we've
Mhm.
had people for 5 or 6 years, don't get me wrong. But when you're expanding the business, I think we've had 5 or 6 new client requests this week even, which is a record. So if all that stuff comes in, you're sort of relying on your existing team to deliver. So I'm constantly trying to build on top of that and bring in new people.
Yeah.
Um, so trying to find some sort of consistent team that we can rely on for X delivery
Mhm.
would be great, but trying to find a way of doing that, without going
Yeah.
the direction of AI, without going the direction of using automated bots, etc. I never want to get away from that human element of recruitment.
Yeah.
And I think that's what gets us in there with most companies because, hey, we're actually real people and oh, we have a personality as well. Oh, and we can deliver.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty important. So I'm not sure how to make that massive step forward apart from do what we do and try and find better people.
Yeah. 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 It's definitely, as you're expanding on that, trying to find good people. I think that is a challenge that most businesses have.
Of
And
course.
it's definitely a skill, learned over time, on the different levels and stages of your
Yeah.
business as well. So, but yeah, I mean, the nuance of you having people all over the world and having to manage all of that, I'm sure that brings certain extra complexities that a lot of other people don't need,
It's
um,
fun.
to
There's
deal with.
there's
Yeah, it's fun.
there's surprise holidays that pop up in Brazil you're not aware of, so people aren't working that day or that week, or it's a Rio Carnival, or it's a religious thing in Mena, or it's like it's trying to keep a helicopter view of everything. So you're like recognizing this, you're appreciating that, you're not bothering people on a Sunday because they have a certain belief, whatever. So yeah, again, it's trying to play that sort of multiple hats type person without
Yeah.
letting it impact your emotion or what the client sees coming through.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Oh, that's very interesting. Well, David, for people that are looking to learn a little bit more about what you do, or maybe how you can help them, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
dkr-limited.com is our website. Always open to giving advice, Jason. We have we've sort of dabbled around a lot with sort of doing blogs and so on the website and talking about personal experiences. Um, when I started in recruitment in 2003, it was a minefield. I worked in Australia. I was interviewing engineers and architects. Didn't have a clue. So, whenever I meet people who are keen to get into recruitment, it is an industry which nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, I want to do that. But I also would never think of going into another industry because it sort of ticks all my boxes in
Yeah,
terms of the travel and international element of it. So I guess recruitment is very much an industry which can make or break you. And it's about trying to be resilient and, celebrate those good days over the bad days.
yeah,
And it is transitioning a lot. And our business has been reliant on freelancers, which I see a lot of companies going down that route of. But again, it's trying to keep that traditional method of recruitment. So I've spoken to people starting off in IT recruitment. I've spoken to people starting off in construction recruitment. I try to put them off in the first sort of breath, but I think you have to be passionate and you have to be really focused on what the client are looking for. And
yeah,
I've been doing that for 20 years, so I don't see it changing in the near future. Hopefully not
yeah.
anyway. That's not the plan.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Amazing. I definitely recommend everyone reaching out to David, particularly if you feel that he can help you in any way with your recruitment needs based on what you've heard on the show today. So thank you so much, David, for being on the show today. I really appreciate you taking out the time
Thank
and
you.
just sharing your experience and lessons I've learned. So yeah, you're very, very welcome to being on. So, and as a reminder to everyone listening, this show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way that established businesses are creating a reliable acquisition channel of conversations with their ideal prospects that doesn't rely on any of the old, ineffective traditional marketing methods that everybody hates. To find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn, have a chat. That's Jason A. Osborne. The link to that will be in the show notes below. And until next episode, stay inspired.